Episode 344, Movin' Out. This is the Change Underground. I'm your host, John. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Following on from last week's heatwave stories comes an article from The Conversation dated the 23rd of June, 2023. Quote, "If you take a plunge in the sea this winter, you might notice it's warmer than you expect, and if you're fishing off Sydney and catch a tropical coral trout, you might wonder what's going on. The reason is simple: hotter water. The ocean has absorbed the vast majority of the extra heat trapped by carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. It's no wonder heat in the oceans is building up rapidly, and this year it's off the charts. That's even without the likely arrival of El Niño, where the Pacific Ocean gets warmer than usual and affects weather all over the world. Our coastal waters are forecast to be especially warm over the coming months, up to 2.5 degrees C warmer than usual in many places," end quote. Woo and indeed who? Further evidence of moves away from the equator. Somewhat easier for wee fishies and their cohabitants of the ocean. I'm sure if we looked we'd see similar things going on land. So I Googled, and here's a piece from The Guardian relating to the Northern Hemisphere, dated December the 3rd, 2020, entitled, "Atlas Reveals Birds Push Further North Amid Climate Crisis." Quote, "Europe's breeding bird populations have shifted an average of 1 kilometre north every year for the past 3 decades, likely driven by the climate crisis, according to one of the world's largest citizen science projects on biodiversity. The European Breeding Bird Atlas provides the most detailed picture yet of the distribution of the continent's birds after 120,000 volunteers and field workers surveyed 11 million square kilometres, from the Azores in the west to the Russian Urals in the east," end quote. This week's heatwaves across the southwest of the US, China, Spain, Portugal, France, Italy and Germany, as foreshadowed in the last episode, are but a continuation of the trend spotted by the birders and the oceanic research mentioned in the first article. On that article, they do go to list the 8 species they mentioned in the article, travelling further from the equator, south on this occasion. And they are the Moorish idol, branching coral, eastern rock lobster, gloomy octopus, white-tipped reef shark, dugongs, red emperor, a warm-water gamefish, and of course the long-spined sea urchin. I'll leave you to read their stories except for the gloomy octopus. Once commonly found on the New South Wales coast, it's turned up down our way in Tassie. About 1,000 clicks in a straight line from Sydney to Hobart, the respective state capitals. Things are crook, as they say. Well, the full quote from a Depression-era New South Wales goes, "Things are crook in Mollymook and there's no work in Burke." There you go, a little bit of bonus social history for you, dear listener. So what's going on in the oceans? Well, from another piece in The Conversation, dated 21 June 2023 and entitled "Ocean Heat is Off the Charts," here's what that means for humans and ecosystems around the world. Quote, "Ocean temperatures have been off the charts since mid-March 2023, the highest average level in 40 years of satellite monitoring, and the impact is breaking through in disruptive ways around the world. The Sea of Japan is more than 7 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 4 degrees Celsius, warmer than average. The Indian monsoon, closely tied to conditions in the warm Indian Ocean, has been well below its expected strength. Spain, France, England and the whole Scandinavian peninsula are also seeing rainfall far below normal, likely connected to an extraordinary marine heat wave in the east and North Atlantic. Sea surface temperatures have been between 1.8 and 5 degrees F, that's 1 to 3 degrees C, above average from the coast of Africa all the way to Iceland," end quote. So that's what's being measured, but why now? Well, we are moving into an El Niño event. That warms things up a bit, but not sufficiently to explain the change, and we're also coming off a La Niña, so things are a bit cooler. But according to the article, and I have no reason to doubt it, underlying everything is global warming. The continuing rising trend of sea surface and land temperatures for the past several decades as human activities have increased greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere, end quote. Things are, as I say, crook, and chickens are coming home to roost. Whilst we're in the depth of winter here in the glorious northwest of Tasmania and the winds are cool to cold, they have been predominantly coming from the north-northwest, so off the mainland as the changes have swept across the Great Australian Bight. Some have popped up from the southwest off Antarctica, and they have been at the cooler end of things. Yet we have had some days of sunshine, very sweet days of sunshine. But out of the wind and in the sun, there's just an extraordinary amount of warmth. Anecdotal, I'll admit, but really, in July, the Southern Hemisphere equivalent of the Northern Hemisphere's January in seasonal terms, if that gives people some context. It fills me with foreboding for the coming summer. Worrying enough here in Tassie, but very concerning for the mainland, with the Canadian fires as an example of the sort of thing we might have to look forward to. We have much in common with those marine species mentioned above. Mrs. Change Underground and I live in Tassie partly as climate change refugees, and there are many others, and the numbers only seem to be growing. Mitigation efforts will be necessary before we get through this as a species. Change is happening, as I discussed last week, but we still need to remove the excess greenhouse gases still extant. Building codes, town planning, power grids, land usage, workplace patterns, and just about everything we do as an urbanised species will need to change. Now, I'm not advocating for pouring iron filings into the ocean, which apparently would cool things down, nor for giant sunscreens in space, yet. But change is upon us. Do we react, or do we try to get ahead of the curve? Hopefully the latter, for all of the biosphere's sakes. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back, all things being equal, next week. This has been a JM Podcasting Services production. Link in the show notes.